It was Mahatma Gandhi who first said, first they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, then you win. Oh yeah, we're seeing a lot of that today, playing out, becoming part of the fabric of our country today in ways that no one ever imagined, and not for the good sometimes either. I'm going to get some great examples of that in a minute. Hi, this is Colin Flaherty. I'm the author of Don't Make the Black Kids Angry, kicked off of Amazon. Available on Smashwords and other places soon. Here we talk about black violence, black on white crime, black on white hostility, wildly out of proportion. Now, so many reporters and public officials and other people are in denial, deceit, and delusion about it. We talk about it without racism, without rancor, without apologies. So I couldn't help but think of that saying from Gandhi when I started going through my email and going through my news sources today, when I saw a story out of Sacramento where a woman who's like the leader of the Black Lives Matter in Sacramento, whatever that means, she's talking about how she's not down with the cops. She's an abolitionist. She wants to get rid of cops because cops are always messing with black people for no reason whatsoever. And that's why that guy, Stephen Clark, last year in Sacramento, he got shot just because the cops were out rolling around looking for something to do. Yeah, that's a lie. But she said she wants to abolish cops. I know. So that sounds, so on a scale of 1 to 10, give me how stupid does that sound? Pretty stupid. It's never going to happen. Correct? Okay, well, hear me out. Let's see how stupid it really might turn out to be. I mean, what if 20 years ago, while George Bush was standing on the smoking rubble at 9/11, you or I had gone in front of a TV camera and said, I predict within 20 years, women wearing hijabs and supporting the people who blew up these towers, who knocked these towers down, and who support violent Islamic terrorism around the world, they are going to be in Congress, in state legislatures, and in city councils all over the country. I predict that. Nobody would have believed that. You would have been scorned as an out-of-control, delusional maniac for saying that. Yet that is what we have today. How about this one? Just say even 10 years ago. Say, I believe 10 years from now, it is going to be held as a right, a really important thing for women to have. All the women are going to love having this privilege of being able to abort a child at the moment of birth. Yes. Well, that's what's happening now in New York, Rhode Island, Virginia, other places. I mean, this is like the law of the land now, and it's gaining steam. Did anybody see that coming 10 years ago? I mean, I thought 10 years ago, it seems like the tide was turning to fewer abortions, less acceptance of it. I mean, there are states, a couple of states in this country, I don't even think there are abortions, not because it's been outlawed, but because they simply can't find any doctors and nurses to help in that gruesome procedure. But now all of a sudden we have babies being killed an instant before they're officially born, even after they're born. And somehow that's a great victory for women's rights. So I mean, nobody saw that coming 10 years ago. How about this one? I believe that someday boys who like to dress up like girls will be allowed to compete in wrestling, boxing, soccer, lacrosse, track meet, weightlifting, and lots of other sports that were previously reserved for girls. Would you bet on that? I don't think you would have. All of a sudden, though, that's what we see. We see wrestling. We see state champions in wrestling and in soccer and in track and field. Guys competing against girls. Anybody see that coming? No, we would have ridiculed it 10 years ago. Now all of a sudden it's like, just shows up. It's there. It's a reality. Now we got this chick out in Sacramento playing the same game. And it's easy to say, wow, that's the stupidest thing I ever heard. Let's hear her out. Let's see how stupid it sounds.
So I think it's good. I mean, I consider myself an abolitionist, so I don't think that we need the police. I think that the community can do very well protecting itself. So I think that it's a step in the right direction to stop making it. I mean, you've seen the police have been called on people all over the country for really stupid reasons, and sometimes it ends up in people getting killed. So to eliminate that, just don't call the police.
Yeah. I know it's not here in Sacramento, but do you think it is something that would divide us more, or could it send the right message, or what do you think?
I don't think the things that we do have the power to divide us. I think that people are already divided. People have already chosen a side. It's gone on so long and it's been so public in the public eye that people have already decided who they're with. So I feel like it's not going to divide us, but it is going to protect us.
And lastly, just when it comes to emergency calls, though, I mean, could it be dangerous if someone doesn't call? Like, what if they sincerely need help and, you know, like in this situation where maybe police can help them?
Well, I think as a community we need to build a structure and put it in place so that it replaces the police, and do this in a way that doesn't emulate what we currently have, because the way that it's happening now doesn't work. So I really believe that, there could be situations where somebody actually needs help, but if it's medical attention, then you call an ambulance. If I've had my car broken into, call the police, they didn't do anything. It's always after the fact. Sometimes they're rude. So it's just, I really feel like we just don't need them, but we definitely do need things in place so that we can rely on each other instead when situations arise.
And this all stems from what? A distrust, a disconnect? What is this stemming from?
I mean, there's a long history of the police and what they're meant to do, and they're doing what they're supposed to. So yeah, there's distrust, there's also anxiety, there's fear. I mean, they're killing us in the street. So, and it happens regularly here in Sacramento. So there's fear.
Sound pretty stupid. Sounds like something we never do. Well, guess what? We're already doing it. Let's check out this story from Cleveland. We're going to learn about the interrupters. This is not a one-off. This is a common approach in cities all over the country with similar results.
A man considered armed and dangerous by LMPD is arrested for allegedly strangling a woman and raping her. But that's only part of the story. Thanks for joining us at 6. Turns out the suspect was getting paid with taxpayer dollars to actually stop violence.
He was one of the city's so-called interrupters, part of the Office of Safe and Healthy Neighborhoods, which had recently increased its staff to 40 people. Natalia Martinez we're looking into this for us today, and she joins us now live to break down this exclusive investigation.
We've been working on a story about the interrupter program, which now has a budget of $1.7 million. And just last week, Louisville's Mayor Greg Fisher gave a press conference trying to save it from cuts with a tax increase. But officers tell me this latest arrest proves the program should be axed. They're called interrupters, men and women with criminal records, part of a 40-person staff hired through the city to prevent or interrupt crime. But some don't buy it.
There's a significant question about what it is that this group exactly does, and I don't think there's any faith in the rank and file officers that they are effective.
Interrupters are part of the Cure Violence program. They don't answer to or even communicate with LMPD. In fact, officers told us they don't even know who they are, except for this guy, Dwight Taylor. Arrested Friday, tracked down at one of the Cure Violence sites after a woman said he punched her, strangled her, then raped her. Police making note of the markings on her face and neck. Turns out Taylor was an interrupter with a $33,000 taxpayer-funded salary. The head of the program, Rashad Abdul Rahman, told me the allegations are very serious and they've since fired Taylor. But he still defends the program.
This kind of approach is absolutely the future of what public safety needs to look like.
Abdur Rahman says homicides are down, in part because of interrupters, and says their criminal backgrounds are necessary.
They feel like they have a debt to their community, they have a debt to their neighborhood, they want to repay that. They want to be a positive force.
Councilman Anthony Piagentini says the program hasn't proven its worth and questions the interrupters' accountability. In fact, he says shootings are up.
It sounds very interesting. It sounds revolutionary. So I'm not interested in faith. I'm interested in results.
Another note, Chicago piloted an interrupters program. I gave their police department a call, and they told me they no longer work with interrupters, especially after one of their leaders was indicted as part of a federal drug and gang probe.
In my little town of Wilmington, Delaware, their version of the interrupters are called peacekeepers. They go around wearing orange jackets, they walk through the hood, they give out flyers to the fat young fellas. They give them counsel, but always flyers. First thing that says on the flyers, don't talk to cops. Get a lawyer. If a cop stops you, just tell him your name and you're not a threat. Don't talk to cops. They didn't say, if you see a crime, tell a cop. No, don't talk to cops. We don't need cops. Cops don't do anything but arrest black people for no reason whatsoever. That's how you keep the peace. By institutionalizing a code of no snitching. Did you see that one coming 10 years ago? That in order to cure crime, we would hire a bunch of ex-cons, let them loose on the street, and give them the instructions. Go tell young black people not to testify in criminal proceedings. That's what we have today. It's not just Cleveland where they caught the guy being a bad criminal. Hell, in Baltimore, Philadelphia, this is like run-of-the-mill. Hire criminals to do stuff. They're going to act like criminals. Please don't act surprised when they do. And so while we have Black Lives Matter in Sacramento proudly telling the world she's an abolitionist, who's against that? Nobody. She's in favor of abolishing police. Black crime, black on white crime, black crime, wildly out of proportion, proceeds apace all over the country. Who's going to interrupt this stuff?
Police say Carolyn Tiger had been in a minor crash on Meadowview Drive. That person followed her down Elm Eugene Street and blocked her at the intersection of Patton Avenue. Her and two other people, including a child in a car seat, stuck inside the car.
Out of the vehicle, she zoned off because she saw him going to the trunk. And when he was going to the trunk, I'm looking like, what is he getting ready to do?
He then started shooting.
Subject is 1032 with a AK-47 assault rifle.
Carolyn tried to drive away but crashed into this fence. She later died at the hospital from a gunshot wound. Her alleged killer took off in a blue Hyundai.
That's my great-grandbaby.
Those who live nearby, like Mary, now taking a closer look at her family photos.
That's my granddaughter, my great-grand.
As she becomes sick at the thought of losing someone because of random anger.
Could have paid for it to get that fixed. Why would he shoot her because of a minor accident?
Friends are remembering the life of Muhammad Sharif, a UTC student who was shot and killed while trying to sell an Xbox One outside the River City North apartments in the Hickson area. Now, this happened on Tuesday afternoon, and our Casey Freeman is live from the Chattanooga Police Department with more. Casey?
Well, David, the Chattanooga police investigators have arrested this man, DeMarcus White. He was charged with criminal homicide. Muhammad Sharif's friends shared their condolences on Facebook. Dozens of people posted on Facebook with a heavy heart after the news about the death of their friend Muhammad Sharif. Chattanooga police investigators say Sharif's phone records show he was in communications with DeMarcus White earlier in the day. The two were exchanging messages on Facebook about selling an Xbox One. Sharif's friends posted on Facebook calling him uplifting. Out of respect for the family, they did not want to go on camera, but they say Sharif would have given the guy the Xbox if he really needed it that bad. According to court documents, White messaged Sharif intending to rob him for the Xbox. During the robbery, White shot Sharif in the back. A friend posted saying, "This makes me sick that someone could do something so heartless." Sharif's Facebook profile says he was a student at UTC and a member of the class of 2019. Another classmate posted thanking him for guidance through freshman and sophomore year. They call Sharif a kind, good-hearted man who could lighten any dark room.
Judy Williams says she was watching TV when she noticed the alarm.
And the back light come on, the buzzer went off, and I went out there just expecting to see a little animal of some sort, and walked about 20 foot away from the back door, and a tall, thin guy come running from the back of the garage and grabbed me, slammed me to the ground face down, and started beating me over the head with a rock or some kind of stone on my back. I had my hand over the back of my head and screaming for my husband. And
Judy says after hearing her scream, her husband Gene came to her rescue, but she says that's when the attacker changed his focus to Gene.
I ran in the house and got the gun and come out and just started shooting, and he ran.
Both Gene and Judy have substantial injuries.
Minor bruises and cuts and stuff, and on my hand where I had my hand over my head, and I have several staples in the back of my head where I never did lose consciousness, but a lot of blood. My husband lost an eye.
You know, if nothing else happens because of this podcast, one thing just happened. It's a reminder that when you go downstairs to pick up your laundry, put your gun in your robe. When you go upstairs to use the restroom, make sure your gun's in your robe. When you go outside to check on something that went bump in the night, put your gun in your hand. I'm guilty of the same thing that woman and that man are guilty of. We shouldn't be guilty of that, okay? So that's a little public service announcement. Okay, so we just heard 3 stories where one of the fellas was killing somebody or hurting somebody really, really bad. Well, we caught them. We know who they are. They're either in jail or they'll be in jail soon. End of story. Go back to the beginning. Start over, correct? No. Turns out that story just beginning right now. Why don't we go down to Prince George's County? Does that name ring a bell to anybody? It's one of those things that I think was kind of hiding in plain sight, at least from me, for a long time, until somebody told me what it was, and I looked it up. Sure enough, that's what it was. Prince George's County is a place, I think, it's on the outskirts of Washington, D.C. It's a black county. It's a county for black people, by black people. Got started because people who went to work for the federal government, black people who were working in Washington, D.C., wanted a place where they were not going to be subjected to the relentless white racism of Washington, D.C. So they said, well, we just bind together out in Prince George's, then we won't have to worry about the cops coming and arresting us for committing all this crime, which we don't commit, which they are just making up, correct? Then we can have our own law with black cops and black judges and black juries and black prosecutors. God, that's going to be fantastic. Of course, Prince George's County is just as dangerous as any county in America. Lots and lots of crime, lots of violent crime, lots of crimes against property, lots of it not reported. But even by the standards of Prince George's County, you're not going to believe this story.
A man who police say raped and killed a 14-year-old on her way to school in Prince George's County is a free man today. Matthew Bethea was released from a facility in Jessup, Maryland this morning. He served less than 9 years, leaving the family of Nia Owens in utter disbelief. Janice Park explains why this convicted killer was released so soon and the flaw with a Maryland law that led to his early freedom.
Take a look at Matthew Bethea, a convicted child killer now roaming the streets. He is free today, despite the agony that he has caused Nia Owens' mother.
What happened in the system that this was so terribly wrong? And I can't get my thinking around that, and I probably will never understand why this man is allowed to get out in less than 9 years.
More than 20 years ago, police say that Bethea raped and strangled the little girl to death. She was on her way to Northwestern High School in Prince George's County, and she was only 14. It would take over a decade to link Bethea to the crime through DNA. At the time of his conviction in 2010, he struck a deal where he took a plea for second-degree murder, but would have his sex offense thrown out despite damning DNA evidence. And here we are 22 years after the brutal murder, and Bethea is released because he took part in something called Maryland's diminution credit process. He originally was supposed to serve 15 years of a 30-year sentence, but he's free today because of good behavior.
They can take classes if they have good behavior, if they're in a work program. There are several different ways, and it's really to incentivize good behavior while confined.
And here's an interesting part of the case. Normally a rapist or anyone who sexually assaults a minor can't participate in diminution credits, but remember, Bethea had his sex offense thrown out.
So someone was murdered, killed, a 14-year-old child was killed, and her killer is only doing about 8.5 years. There's an injustice in that. There's an inherent injustice in that. And I will work with our legislature to try to correct that injustice.
So a dude he rapes a girl, then he kills her, and then because of the people in Prince George's County, he gets out of jail in 8.5 years. If I had told you that, would you have believed me without having seen that video? I wouldn't have. I would have said, "Oh, I got to see that. That's too unbelievable. 8.5 years for rape and murder. That's all. I don't believe you. Show me." Well, we just showed you. What do you think about it now? I can't help but thinking of all the stories we've done in the last 2 months on rape among black women. And how Huffington Post just a couple weeks ago ran a big story. It's supposed to be a sympathetic story. And there's a line in there that says, yeah, black women don't report rape because black women are trained to protect the race at all costs. That's a direct quote. Tons and tons. I mean, when you think of these like black women in public life, it kind of backs up the number that the enormous number of black women are being raped and it's not being reported. I mean, look at Oprah. Oprah was just talking about it today. It started when she was 9 years old. Melissa Harris Perry, she was talking about black women being raped by black men. She said, well, we don't report rape and domestic violence because we know what the racist cops do to black men, so we don't call. There's stories out there that say 65% of black women have been raped. 65% of black college women have been raped before they go to college. 90% of them never reported. And so I don't know how, you know what, I don't even want to think about how or why this thing started, how or why it's soaked into the criminal justice system, but it clearly has in this case. 8.5 years for, let's say the girl was still alive and they gave this guy 8.5 years for rape. I'd be up here pitching a you-know-what for that. But then he went on and killed her, and still he gets 8.5 years. You want to tell me that people in Prince George's County don't have their mind on right? Of course they don't. 8.5 years. And these are the people we are going to put in charge of justice for our community, which is what they want in Sacramento. Oh, by the way, we didn't even talk about Sacramento, did we? The enormous level of black violence in Sacramento. How many stories have we done in the last year about black on Asian violence in South Sacramento? How many? A ton of stories. How many times have we seen city councilmen at large meetings, and on the meetings they keep going on, then they keep getting smaller, and the voices they're saying they're going to do something keep getting less strident, and at the end of the third, fourth, fifth meeting, third, fourth, fifth story, a city councilman gets up there and very meekly, has to come to the conclusion that, well, we can't really do much about it. Sorry about that. Hope you don't get hurt too badly, Asian people in South Sacramento. It's a thing. Targeting Asian people is a thing in Sacramento, San Francisco, LA, Philadelphia, New York. It's a thing. It's a black thing. And yet we're supposed to believe that black people are relentless victims of relentless white racism, when it's the other way around. Why don't we head out to Seattle? Seattle and Portland stand alone as two centers of not just black violence, but ultra denial. They're so determined to live in a perfect place that they have made perfect with their copious quantity of virtue display that they just don't want to admit this ever is a part of their lives. All of a sudden, you're a mom and you're selling Girl Scout cookies in front of the local store. A fella comes up, steals your money, steals $600. And let's listen to the confession from the mom. Then let's listen to the advice from the reporter.
And he just started running, and he pushed past one of the girls and grabbed the money and just took off and got into a car that was waiting for him.
The North Seattle Girl Scout troop members were cold and tired after 2 hours of cookie sales outside this QFC store Sunday. That's when a man rushed toward them.
Little freezing cold girls hawking cookies. I know. Mean, low. It was the lowest of the low.
Jennifer says the man swiped their cash envelope, about $600 in total. She says the theft terrified her 11-year-old daughter.
She'd been crying. I mean, she was, and she was very sad, and she didn't want to sleep alone. So I got the company of her in my bed that night, and then she didn't want to walk to school the next morning either.
Just last year, a troop in Tacoma were robbed of their cookie earnings as well.
It makes you furious. What kind of person would rob a Girl Scout booth?
The Girl Scouts say they train kids and volunteers to stay in high-traffic, well-lit areas and how to manage money during their busy sales season. They tell Como what happened Sunday isn't going to stop their troops.
What they're going to be is ticked off and wanting to show the world that they are Girl Scouts and that resilience will come through.
Seattle police released this photo today of the man they're looking for. Jennifer says he was hanging out near their table for a while Sunday, asking questions about the cookies and how long the troop would be there.
And I just thought, this is odd, but what are you going to do?
She keeps thinking about her interactions with the man that night and is critical with herself for not telling him to go away earlier.
Trust your gut, because I think, especially as women, we're kind of taught to ignore that and to not ever be rude.
Jennifer tells me that what happened Sunday at their cookie booth is something she hopes her daughters will learn from, that if you feel uncomfortable in a situation, to report it or call 911.
So what the mom said, I should have called. I should have told him something. Oh, no. You know why you didn't, because in Portland and Seattle, if you look a black person in the eye and say, you're suspicious looking, you don't belong here, we're conducting business, and we don't like you don't have any business being here unless you're buying cookies. If you are, take them and leave. Then you know why they didn't do that, because they didn't want to be that lady in the hallway of the apartment building who refused to let the black person in the door because he didn't have a key and was later vilified as the nastiest person in America because she was profiling him. He didn't have a key. He didn't want to show his key. So the mom too late goes, oh man, I should have done something. You know, her negligence is amplified by the fact that her daughter was there. So if you're walking down the street and you have an encounter with a black person that may or may not be pleasant, may or may not be unpleasant, that's on you. But when you're with your child, then then you have to start looking at everything through the child's lens, and you have to risk less. If you see a sketchy person hanging around your child on a playground or near your Girl Scout thing, you're not allowed to sit there and go, well, he's probably a nice person. And by the way, everybody now is saying, just like that woman said from the Black Panthers in Sacramento, white people are always calling the cops on black people for no reason whatsoever. And black people are getting killed. We're getting killed because white people are always calling the cops on us for no reason. And the reporter, totally oblivious of that. Well, she's not, because she's been reporting that, not today, but other times. That station has. The reporter gets in there and totally goes against this new paradigm. She goes, yeah, call somebody. You see something, call. Okay, I get it why you say it then, but why don't you ask the people who are when they're looking in the camera, like that woman from Sacramento, saying, don't call white people. No, we don't want white people calling police because that just gets black people killed because white people are insane. Why doesn't somebody ask about that? Why doesn't somebody give some examples? We don't need the cops. We're abolitionists now. This isn't a novel thing. It will turn novel the day that a reporter looks that person in the eye and says, yeah, what about all that crime? What about that Girl Scout, $600, a sketchy black dude was hanging around the table. Should we have called the cops on him? What should we have done? Do Girl Scouts have a merit badge for self-defense, marksmanship, carrying a handgun? They don't. They should get one. But you know what? They probably won't. You know, this is something I kind of been noticing for a long time with Girl Scouts. I have a couple friends, their kids are Girl Scouts. They're really into it. So I never, ever mention this because I don't want to be a bore about it. Girl Scouts are totally into the social justice warrior thing now. Kind of like the YWCA. Totally down with I am woman, diversity, the whole phony baloney business. And so part of being in a Girl Scouts is kind of signing off on that view of the world. The view of the world that, you know what, no matter what Colin says about unequal crime rates, I'm just going to treat that sketchy looking person over there like he's a Boy Scout leader and we're going to bring out the best in him. Fairy tale, putting your child at risk. That's what Girl Scouts are. Check if you got a kid in Girl Scouts or a niece or something, next door neighbor, say, hey, can I see you ever see him in a Girl Scout uniform? And next time they sell you some cookies, say, hey, what are you guys doing, Girl Scouts, these days? Maybe you can see their Girl Scout handbook. You'll see what I'm talking about in very short order. There's one group that is more down with the cause than Girl Scouts. It's not a very good segue. But I mean, okay, so we got this woman from Sacramento. We're going to police our own community. I'm an abolitionist. I believe we could do that. I mean, what about this Philadelphia lawyer you're about to meet? This was a guy that's down with the cause, a black guy down with the cause. He's involved in prison reform, prison rights. Let's hear his story.
37-year-old Spencer Hill says it was just before 10:30 Monday night. He was walking off 52nd at Hazel on his way home from work.
I got maybe 3/4 of the way down the block, and I heard somebody charging behind me, so I turned around ready to fight. And when I turned around, the person froze. He shot me and then ran away. I saw the muzzle flash and I felt some pain, but I wasn't actually sure I was shot.
Hill soon realized he had been shot in the chest, made it home, and called police.
The police showed up fairly quickly and rushed me to the hospital, so thank you to the Philadelphia police that did that for me.
Police believe the suspect was attempting to rob Hill and that the crime may be linked to another robbery at gunpoint 10 minutes earlier at 52nd and Addison.
A 65-year-old male was held up, pointed gun, and they took his coat and about $30.
Meantime, Hill, on Ballard Spar's Twitter account, is seen recently speaking to law students about his struggles and how, despite those struggles, persevered and followed his dream of becoming a lawyer. His wife says he is emotionally hurt by the attempted robbery and shooting in a West Philadelphia neighborhood they love.
He takes a lot of pro bono work. He does a lot of work for prisoners' rights. Good stand-up guy. So it definitely has altered his thinking.
Oh yeah, he's a good guy. Translation, he's down with the cause. We can't figure out why the cause is not down with him. Don't black people in West Philadelphia know how to separate the people who are down with the cause from the people who are not down with the cause? Didn't we deserve a pass from this ridiculous level of black violence in and around West Philadelphia because this guy, my husband, he's been doing nothing but acting as a disruptor in prisons, reminding everybody the only reason people are in prison is because of white racism. Why else would more black people than white people be in prison by a factor of like 5, 6, 7, or 8? Why? You're suggesting that black people commit more crimes in this country? If you do that, and someday you decide to write a book and put it on Amazon, your book's going to get kicked off. Then if you say it again on Facebook, you'll get kicked off there. You know, I want to get to a couple more stories here. Why don't we take a little change of pace here about a book I recently read about a great friend of this channel, K.M. Brakey. As soon as I said K.M. Brakey, somebody decided to honk their horn outside of my little mini studio here. I'll take that as an omen, Kent. Call him Kent. Amazon, he's K.M. Brakey. Anyway, he's got a new, we've talked about his book before, Johnny and Jamal, great book. Then we talked about his book about South Africa, Never Say Never Again. Then we talked about, that's not the exact title, but then he's got a new book out now called All Thy Sons. And this book, it's a little different than his other books. The other books were fantastic, so is this one. I myself enjoy reading a little science fiction and what you would classify in the bookstores as fantasy. I don't feel comfortable with some of these classifications because I'm thinking of one guy, one of my favorite authors. His name is David Jamel. Wrote a book called Legend. I mean, every once in a while, some supernatural creature comes rolling around and, affects the plot. But these people in these books and the things they're going through and how they meet their challenges and what it means to be a hero, what it means to be a villain, and how these things interact. This guy, David Jamel, is as good as anybody writing books right now. Anybody. And I think guys and women, we read different books. This is a little more action oriented. Maybe there's a sword fight every now and then. If you ever want to read somebody new, try David Jamel. Start off with Legend. Also try this K.M. Brakey, All Thy Sons. Because this is one of these books that kind of in a dystopian future where the character, 10 years in the future, one of the characters thinks he's kind of immune from this level of racial violence and hostility that we document here all the time. Well, I think he learns the hard way how that's not true, and he has another buddy, and they try to figure out what it all means together. And boy, there really haven't been that many books written on this whole topic of black on white hostility. Not where the white people are involved. No, I mean, if you go to Amazon, you go to Barnes & Noble, you go to the, you go to any section saying African-American literature, or you'll see plenty of fiction and nonfiction on black on white hostility. Children's books, too. But the only one I can think of where the white guy is not a total villain is, besides Kent's new book, of course, is Bonfire of the Vanities. So if you enjoyed that kind of point of view of Bonfire of the Vanities, that humor, that piercing analysis, the great other things that really make for a great novel, I think you'll enjoy Kent's book as well. So if you're looking for something to read, check out Kent's book, All Thy Sons, and let me know what you think of it. Oh, and while we're over here, every once in a while we do a little takeout on, what you can do if you really want to be a part of this and take it to a new level. Okay, so the other podcasts, we talk about sharing, liking, subscribing, commenting, feed the great algorithm in the sky. We also talk about how you guys always share your stories. The stories you heard about in this podcast, I got them all today from viewers. Of course I did. And listeners. So that's a great way to do it. People dropped a few coins in the old PayPal cup. You can find that at colinflaherty.com. People sign up for my email. Really important. Find that over at colinflaherty.com. But here's something. If you really wanted to hear something new, if you really wanted to do something, make a difference, you could do it probably, I'm thinking of 10 people right now. I remember all their names. I don't want to mention them because I don't like mentioning people's names in this work. It's too tricky. cops and people I'm talking about now are cops and teachers, okay? I remember one time a guy said, hey, Colin, I just sent your stuff over to Alex Jones. Boom, got a call from Alex Jones. Next thing you know, I'm on that show 3 times in the next couple months. Yeah, if this is the place where we insert the ritual, well, I don't know about all of Alex Jones's blah, blah, blah. Yeah, well, you know what? I don't care about that. Then there was a woman in Springfield, Missouri. I did a story about her and her son. Her son was attacked by a group of 20 black people in Springfield, Missouri. They were going to college down there. They were out of the fraternity. Like the black fraternity was having a party next to where he lived. He goes out to get something out of his car at midnight. Next thing you know, bing, bam, boom, he's on the ground. Like having one of those spasms you have when you're really hurt really bad. Bad business. Anyway, so she was determined she was going to find the people who hurt her son. And she didn't get any help from the cops. She didn't get any help from the school where a couple of the guys played football. Everybody was clamming up. The cops didn't want anything to do with it. Sherry Godfrey, she just kept going on and on and on. And finally, she dragged these people into court and won a significant settlement from them. But the thing Sherry Godfrey did, which was good, was she just wrote a little email to Sean Hannity. Said, hey, Sean, I heard your show. I heard you talking about this. You ought to get Colin Flaherty on there to talk about this black violence and what happens with it. And how it's all so often ignored. Boom, we're on Sean Hannity. I've been on there 3 times. Same with Jim Bohannon. Same with lots of national guys and local guys. Okay, you want a little PR secret here? So I was a reporter for a long time. But I also have my own marketing communications company and my own PR firm. And we specialize in very difficult cases. Lots of land use, lots of development stuff where the Sierra Club's basically trying to shut you down. The landowner would come to me and said, Colin, we want you to write a press release for us. We hear you do that really well. I said, no, I don't write press releases. And yet the last thing you want, here's what we're going to do. Bing, bam, boom. And so when you communicate with reporters, they don't want to hear from Colin, the self-interested author. They didn't want to hear from Johnny Jones, the property owner. They don't mind hearing from the Sierra Club types all day long. But for our side, the rules are different. They just want to hear from regular people. They want to hear from their listeners, from their readers. So if you have somebody you listen to, whether it's a Sean Hannity or a Glenn Beck or a Michael Savage or a Rush or anybody on television, drop them an email. Take another second to figure out who their producer is. The producer is who gets all this stuff. The producer is the gatekeeper. Drop the producer an email saying, hey, Colin Flaherty's done more about hoaxes than anybody. Hey, Colin Flaherty's written more about the greatest lie of our generation, black violence than anybody. And you ought to have him on your show. He's a great guest. He gets a lot of good comments. So if you're up for something like that, just do that. Tell them to call. Yeah, my phone number is easy to find. My address is easy to find. Email is easy to find. It's all over at minds.com/Colin Flaherty. It's on colinflaherty.com. So just, that would be important. Start hitting, or when you read a story somewhere, say, hey, Colin's already done that. Boom, put one of my videos in there, a link to it on a reader's comment or something like that. So you can act as, this is kind of like outsourcing, crowdsourcing the PR for this effort. If you think what we're doing is important, if you want to see more people be exposed to it, then pretend you're my PR guy. Just start sending stuff around. You don't have to make it full of hype or hyperbole. You don't just say, and don't offer any highfalutin, big picture, 30,000 feet above the people view. Just use the language we use here. Keep it nice and short. Give them a link and somehow entice that person to watch or listen to what we're doing. That's how this stuff spreads around. You know that. Some people know it, but they just feel like, oh, I don't know if I want to do that myself. Well, if you think what we're doing here is important, then yeah, you have to start taking this on by yourself. Because when you write about race, you talk about race, everything is different. Everything. I mean, good Lord, I got kicked off Amazon. At least one of my books did. I'm on a 30-day from Facebook. I got kicked off of iTunes. Let people know about that. I mean, the way these efforts are judged, they're judged not only by whether Colin has his facts straight, whether, we know what we're talking about. They're also judged by how popular we are. So the fact that you would take some time to leave my stuff somewhere or drop it over to Sean Hannity's producer or Glenn Beck's producer or Michael Savage's producer or anybody's producer, that's another indication that there's something important, something widespread happening here. So we get, when we get a lot of views here. And I was looking the other day at there's two big guys over on YouTube that spread my videos around. One's called Verifiable Truth, or maybe Undeniable Truth. The other one's called The Great Dolomite, something like that. Easy to find, just put Colin Flaherty in the YouTube search engine. But I was looking at some of the videos, stuff that has been out only for a couple weeks over there has already gotten 75,000 views. And so when you start adding that up, all the people who post my videos over there, all the views we get on mine, Facebook, on Twitter, on all the number of people who watch this podcast, the people who talk about it, we have a really, really good wide reach. A lot of people watching and seeing these things, hearing them. The interesting thing about our viewership is, I think it's it goes between 5 and 8 million a month. But the interesting thing is, I don't think it's the same 5 to 8 million people viewing them. And I think a lot of people come into this channel for a month or a week, and they kind of get exposed to it, and they go, okay, I get it. I'll come, I'll watch it later. And a lot of people are here every day, which is good. A lot of people come in and out, which is also good. They always come back. But what I'm telling you, that makes our numbers actually much bigger than they are. They're spread farther than they seem. Because for every person who watches and takes off, somebody comes in, takes their place with somebody else. So, so really that means you have a lot of people being exposed to this material, a lot of people being exposed to the greatest lie of our generation, the hoax of black victimization. Now, so many people, we document this, are in denial, deceit, and delusion about it. Now we got this Philadelphia lawyer who wants us to cry crocodile tears because, he has decided to devote his life to systematically throwing a monkey wrench into something called, in prison, in the criminal justice system as it applies to prisoners. He's involved in prisoners' rights reform. He's a good guy. What about the victims? Do you have anything to say about the victims of this crime epidemic from black people? If so, I didn't hear it. Now, you are a victim. You want us to start crying crocodile tears about the guy that stuck a gun in your chest and pulled the trigger? Oh my God, he was just trying to rob a loaf of bread so he can go home and feed his 3-year-old sister. I don't really care about those excuses. To me, it's pretty simple. If you shoot somebody, steal somebody, conk somebody on the head, you're going to jail for a long time. You're going for longer than 8.5 years. I really don't care what led you to that place. And if while you're out there on the streets being trying to become the Pied Piper of the fellas in Philadelphia with your prison reform, and one of the fellas doesn't really give a damn about your life or whatever you do, he just sees you as another easy mark in a nice suit. Please, No sympathy here. We're looking forward to that attorney and his wife getting their minds right. We're looking forward to both of them waking up one morning and going in West Philadelphia, you know, we don't have to live here. We don't have to live in a place where walking out the door for us is more dangerous than, you know, hopping in a car and going 80 miles an hour through the city without stopping for red lights. But it's amazing how many people, they devote their entire lives, their professional and personal lives, to being in denial, deceit, and delusion about this level of black criminality, which is so easy to see, easy to find. They devote their lives to it, and then they devote their lives to telling us about it. It's amazing how they're not getting pushback from anybody. Why don't we listen to this little video that came out of the University of Wisconsin in Milwaukee. Now, Milwaukee is a dark and dangerous chocolate city. We've done a lot of stories on Milwaukee, not just the story that gave rise to the white girl bleed a lot story, lots of other stories, black people killing white people on the streets of Milwaukee. How about the riot? I still remember the Milwaukee riots. It's weird how many riots we had that summer. Milwaukee, Charlotte, St. Louis, Baltimore. All curiously caused by the same thing, white racism. Anyway, here's a story from the BBC over in England. Now, they sent one of their crack crews to go report on Wisconsin. This is actually a couple years old, but it was such a perfect story because it explains, if you've ever been over there to England or Ireland or Europe and you watch the TV when they're speaking English about what happens in America, you don't recognize your country you live in because they're casting this big fairy tale. And over in England, and especially in Ireland, England too, it's an article of faith that black people are relentless victims of relentless white racism from some really, really bad white people who all drive pickup trucks. And how they could do this to these sweet, gentle people who are in prison, I don't know, but they do it. That's what they believe on the BBC and in Ireland. And so this is from a couple years ago, but think about the distance between this story and the first one we saw from Sacramento. The woman goes, I don't believe in police forces. Well, if the police forces were instruments of racism and brutality and not of order, well, as this woman in Wisconsin is about to tell us, well, then it's a logical conclusion. Yeah, we should abolish them. Yeah, it's not a logical conclusion. That's an exercise in major league denial, deceit, delusion. Let's give her just a really quick listen to for a couple minutes.
Mass incarceration of black males, it's at epidemic proportions nationally. So then you say to yourself, well then, out of that experience, how can we be even worse? We have a very young African-American population in Milwaukee and Wisconsin, third youngest of the 50 largest metro areas. We looked at the entire county and we found that over half of the African-American men in the county in their 30s had been or were currently in state prison.
Most of my friends are incarcerated or in jail. Yeah, I'm the only one that's even here. I used to sell drugs on the street and stuff, and it was where sometimes I got caught by the police.
When we do job opening surveys, we find that 3/4 of the jobs available are outside the bus lines. The 27,000 African-American men who haven't served time in prison have suspended licenses in the Milwaukee area. The odds are, once you stop the car, either for a missing tail light or for taking a stop sign too fast, you're going to find a suspended driver.
They risk that
you know, and possibly can go to jail, you know, and if it was a job here where I can get on the bus to support my family, I would take it. But because there's nothing here, I have to take this risk to drive out here.
The purpose of the stop is to disrupt criminal activity. If you're quickly able to ascertain you're dealing with the law-abiding, let them on their way with a warning. 80% of our traffic stops are left with warnings. Have a nice day.
You know, you could be coming from the store, you could be coming from playing basketball, but because you're in a group and there's more African Americans in that group, automatically police will think a gang. And that's not fair, because I'm an African American and you see me driving a nice car, doesn't give you a right to pull me over.
77% of our homicide victims are African American? Is this tolerable? They're certainly not 77% of our population. When not over 90% of the perpetrators of homicide in this city are African American, we're called upon to do something.
We've got a very effective police force, and we've got a state legislature that, having built the prisons using federal money, is willing to keep them filled. And so they're very willing to pass laws mandating prison sentences.
If you ask us to suppress crime, and in the course of suppressing violent crime or encountering people with drugs on them, we're going to end up making more arrests in those places for drugs than we might other places that aren't characterized by high rates of violence. And so in that context, I think the notion of mandatory sentences for drug possession need to be re-examined.
If we are willing to lock up half of our generation of young black men and then put on the internet all their offenses, so for the rest of their life you can look up what they did, what is their future going to be?
I have people that'll come in and be like, I will work for minimum wage, you know, I just want to work, but they won't open the door, you know. It's hard, man, it's hard.
It comes to that point where it says like, well, what choice do I have? I can't get a job, so, but knowing that I have to keep thinking positive, you know, I can't really give up.
You know, sometimes it's worthwhile just sitting here trying to picture the backstory on what we just heard. Came out of London, out of the BBC. Somebody who got on an airplane, lots and lots of moving parts, right? Big expense, go to Milwaukee from London. So there had to be somebody like sitting in a room, a bunch of people. They're going, man, we need some stories out of the States. Anybody got one? Go, yeah, why don't we do a story about black people in prison? Everybody knows the Yanks love putting in black people in prison for no reason whatsoever. Let's go do that story. Bing, bam, boom. Everybody goes, that's genius. Yeah, let's do that. Get this chick from Milwaukee. If you could see what she looks like, you would say, hey, I wonder if you ever go down to the ghetto to get, to the new rib shack that just opened down there. Answer is no. Even so, you got people looking into television cameras telling us we have to abolish the police because, well, the white racists are just brutalizing black people in this country. And I don't really have any examples of it well, I do have an example, Colin, except he was a criminal. Does he count? Yeah, that's a good example. A guy running from the cops. A criminal. No, he was not on his way to church or to the law library or to medical school. He was a bad actor that wouldn't follow the legal directives of the cops at night to put his hands up and drop whatever he had in his hands in the dark. And Now we got the BBC telling us, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Oh, hell yeah, Colin, we got to get rid of those cops because everybody knows there's too many black people in prison for no damn reason whatsoever. And to disagree with that, nobody will dare disagree with that, Colin. Because that would make the black kids angry. Talk to you tomorrow.